Hello, and welcome back to UI Chat from the Interface, the monthly show focused on the latest hardware news from Ubiquiti and anything network related. I'm Alex, and once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Evan McCann. Hi, Evan.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I had a busy day filming some different stuff for my car channel today, so I'm all filmed out, but I'm going to soldier on.
Well, hey, what's one more hour, right?
I know. We've got a special guest with us again. So last month we had Cody McCallum from Mac Telecom Networks, so our Christmas special episode, which feels like ages ago now. But welcome, Tom Lawrence. How are you doing?
Doing great today.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us and giving up some of your time. There's loads of stuff to get through. It'll be all good fun. Just before we get into all the latest Ubiquiti news, just want to have a brief chat with yourself, I think most people know who you are anyway, but just in case some people don't know who you are, who is Tom Lawrence?
Usually I say Tom Lawrence from Lawrence Systems at the beginning of some of my videos. I've been working in IT for over 25 years. I've had Lawrence Systems since 2003, so I've been running a business for a while, and I've been doing YouTube. Kind of where I, really put my effort in is 2017. But a lot of it's about sharing kind of the practical knowledge of being a practitioner in network engineering, virtualization, all kinds of technology things. So less about reviews, more about follow up a project. So kind of training people through not like how it works, but how it works in the real world is what I try to think I'm bringing to the channel whenever I can.
That's good. I noticed in the last few years you sort of maybe doubled down on YouTube a little bit more. Yeah. So I guess it's all good fun in terms of that regard.
Yeah. In 2023, I split my company into pieces because the IT side was different than the YouTube side. So officially, Lawrence Systems owns the YouTube channel, but the IT side, when people contact us and hire us, is done through CNWR. So I own part of that company, but I don't deal with the day-to-day management of CNWR because that would be terrible and not fun. Because that's what happens when IT companies get bigger. There's like lots of people, and there's things you don't want to deal with, like the contract negotiation that I watched them arguing about in Slack today. It's not Tom's problem. I hope it goes well for all the people there. And as a shareholder of the company, I hope it's profitable. But do I want to deal with it? Not really. So there's a little bit of a doubling down on YouTube just because it's a weird title I hold because they throw me kind of like as if I'm marketing, but because that's where our leads come from is YouTube that come into the company. But the other side of it is I'm solutions design and architect. So I'm very involved in the projects directly in terms of how they get architected. I don't always do the hands-on deployment, but I will follow people around with a camera and pretend I'm working. And so it's like the best of both worlds. I love the solution design. And of course I like working with the techs directly to see how a solution played out, because if you go and deploy 300 access points, that's cool, but did they work? What problem did you run into? Was my design? I always look for feedback from my team. Like, did the solution I proposed work as well as we thought, or what do we tweak from proposal to, the actual install, because that's where things always get a little hairy. How did it actually work when we installed it? Well, that feature we thought was working didn't work as well as we hoped.
Yeah, and how long really have you guys been, well, yourself as well, but have been using Ubiquiti hardware? What was your first sort of
2013. I looked that up the other day.
A long time ago.
So some of the earliest stuff we were digging out because we're closing one of our offices. We're consolidating. We had a lab in one of our other offices, and when we merged companies, we said, well, we'll keep it for a while. And then we said, all right, let's build the new lab in one place. But we started digging through all the old, we closed down a building that you had for years and brought all the stuff with it. We found some really old Ubiquiti stuff with the old logo on it. And we're like, oh, yeah, remember when we installed this? We started digging around. And I think 2013 was the first commercial installs that we started doing at some of the buildings. And sweet. Yeah, it's been a long time because we had looked at Open Mesh, if you remember them at all, that got acquired by Datto.
Blast from the past on that one, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we were evaluating both solutions, but right away I said, this cloud thing with them, it ain't going to be free forever. This is free until someone runs out of funding, or they come up with some way to do it, or they get bought, and then Datto bought them and turned them into the Datto networking gear, and that was the history. They actually, when they did that, everyone that had that free cloud account, you all have bricks or you can buy a subscription was the options. So,
oh no,
yeah, I mean that's almost when UniFi was first a thing. I think it might have been 2011 or 2012, but
Yep.
2013. Was that like Square UAP days or the?
Yeah, it was. That's the ones
Yeah.
we had found were that. So that's the first ones we bought for testing, I think, were Square, but the first ones we installed for clients were the round ones with that weird old logo. I don't know how to describe it.
It's like a beam logo, yeah.
Yeah, the beam logo. So we installed a lot of those. And what's interesting is, I mean, I remember we did some upgrades for clients, and the one problem we have with them, like, we're amazed that at first I thought they weren't working. I'm like, oh wait, they are working. Their lights all burned out. Remember, the lights burned out on the first gens. They would fade away to nothing because they were blue back then, and they would just fade to no light. You could put if you held them in the dark and had them on, like, oh yeah, and the Wi-Fi, customers like Wi-Fi works fine, so we'd swap them out for some new ones.
And just a final question for you: what one thing have you? Well, not one thing, but what have you learned in general from making YouTube videos for this amount of time? Like, if you could, like, give I guess some advice to someone, or just one thing you sort of
about technology or YouTube.
Yeah. YouTube specifically.
Okay, YouTube. All right. A lot of it's just run forward. So I had no idea when I first started that anyone would be interested in firewall videos. And that's actually my first videos are about firewalls, because I spoke at a lot of conferences. Public speaking isn't part of something I've done at open source and other conferences for most of my business career. I've done these talks, and someone said, hey, can you throw that talk on YouTube, because I wanted to go to your talk, but there's another talk at the same time, how those big conferences go. And I say, hey, no problem. And I realized a lot of people started watching, and I'm like, oh, this is a lot of people. This is more people than were at this event. And I'm like, huh. I started really looking, and I realized there's a ton of people online, and especially you go back to the 2015 when I kind of started the channel, but didn't really figure out what I was doing. You'll find a lot of people will do things like 5,000 views on a video where someone's typing in Notepad and tabbing back and forth to show you how to adjust something. And then I see the looks on your faces like, yeah, like that was the early YouTube. No one was doing a lot of deep technical stuff. There was plenty of unboxings, and Linus was a thing then, but they were very consumer facing, nothing on the enterprise or business side. And I don't really know who my contemporary peers were in 2015 when I started posting these, because you couldn't. Well, they were these people with Notepad, and someone would really aggravate me because I go watch some of them. I'm like, oh, this person's wrong, and there's no motivation for a nerd greater than someone is wrong on the internet. And so I must make the right video that explains this firewall rule properly, because they didn't set it right. But I started doing a lot of firewall videos, and it kind of expanded. If you dig around on my channel, you actually find I did laptop repair videos, because I had a retail store back then. It was a lot of constant production of randomness until I figured out what I wanted to do and where my passion was. But a lot of it, I just say run forward, because so many people get analysis paralysis, or they just try to jump on popular trends. I just never had the desire. I didn't do it for the popularity, or I would have just been, I would have been in gaming PCs, because that was probably the biggest thing in the earlier days on YouTube, was all about the gaming PC builds. And that was never something that really drove interest for me.
Yeah, I've watched my fair share of those Notepad videos when I'm desperately searching for like the one person trying to explain something I'm trying to configure. Makes me very happy for channels like yours.
Yeah, I'm happy as I see so many other people, and it's been a good community I've formed with them. Cody, like you had on last week, there's so many people that I know, and we've started kind of a YouTube group of us that are practitioners, and we've now expanded and have people like Jeff Geerling in there, who's, he's adjacent to what I do. There's a crossover to some extent, but Jeff's an amazing creator, writer of Ansible books and things like that. So there's a lot of these other YouTubers. We all kind of came together to say we're very technical. We're not here to just hype things up, and being practitioners. So it's been a good community that we've seen built around that. Just like there's a big community around the PC gaming and building communities, and I like that there's one here for people that are into network engineering and virtualization and all that. So, well, I feel like there's not a lot of people into virtualization like I am, but I'm crank out videos on it, even because people always ask, Tom, those get really low views. Why do you bother with them? Because I'll do a UniFi video that has 140,000 views. I'll do a virtualization one, it'll get like 6,000 views. So I'm like, I'm following my passion, not the numbers. I do not look at the vanity numbers. Do I like the numbers to go up? Yes. Does that drive me? look at the videos. That's why it's a roller coaster. You're like, your strategy sucks. If anyone were to try to be a business consultant, they would just tell you to do the popular stuff because it makes more money. And they're not wrong in some ways, but I also have a different I'm following my passion, and I have a different monetization model than most people. Leads come in through those that are how we actually monetize most of the channel. I have a few ads here and there, but most of my money comes from the projects that people hire us for.
Makes sense. And you can.
And I keep it all transparent. I hide nothing on that. So if anyone asks, I always open it all up for them.
Yeah, that really allows you to make stuff you want to make versus stuff that you know will get views, and that creates different stuff. It's the same what happened with music. Like when music started being made for streaming, the creative process of music changed because they've got to market it and make it for the first 10 seconds, whereas obviously back in the day music was a bit different. So it's the same kind of thing. So yeah. Very interesting. Thank you for that insight. So, before we go any further, I'd really like to thank everyone who has been supporting this show so far. We'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel on YouTube or leave us a review in your podcast app of choice. It really does help. Thank you. Cool. Evan, you've put some little bits and pieces that aren't really software or hardware into the first section on the show notes. We've got a security advisory bulletin number 45. I haven't really looked at this. I don't really know what's happened with this one. Do you want to take it away?
Yeah, we have a lot of new hardware to get through and some major software releases, but I like pointing these out because they're not super common. We'll see one a month or less usually, but this was Security Advisory Bulletin 45. It's just improper certificate validation leading to a potential man-in-the-middle attack during application update. This only affects UniFi OS 4.18 up through 21. So the 4.0 branch is affected, and this was all fixed in the 4.1 releases. So if you haven't updated to UniFi OS 4.1, make sure to do that.
Yeah, definitely. That's. I don't really understand much about. I'll be honest, how these man-in-the-middle attack thing works, but it's definitely important to keep everything up to date. So awesome.
Watch a video from Tom if you want to know more about
Yes, I will do. I've been dunking on Fortinet lately because they've had some pretty egregious problems. And one thing about UniFi is they've been with their bug bounty program, and Marcus, their head of security, they've been on top of it. I don't have complaints. Anything I pick on them for is stuff that they need to get finished or make more clear or give us a better roadmap for their firewalls. But it's not been egregious security problems, because those are scary.
Yeah, they've definitely been on it with that sort of, and communication on that. That's really important. Communication in terms of what's going on. So something's gone wrong, but
and that was also part of that was a paid out bug bounty as well. So that was and the people that found that, they're some pretty serious hackers. They're part of the PoE. You're above average, we'll just say, security researchers finding bugs. So they're doing it for the bug bounty program. So it's great because this is not something found in the wild or mass exploitation. It's kind of one of those. Hey, they poked at it, they found a problem, UniFi paid them, and that's the way the system works.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This next one, I found, me and Evan were discussing this before show. UniFi Talk Relay is a really weird one. Because we were discussing before show what title to come up with, basically, for the show. And we were saying, Ubiquiti's got so many subscriptions now, and this one's a weird one because it's part of UniFi Talk, and it allows third-party PBX providers to be used with UniFi Talk, essentially. But it doesn't run on any UniFi OS consoles. It's all cloud-based, but only if you're using the official hosting from Ubiquiti. So it's all a bit messy, a little bit strange, but I do appreciate this might be quite useful for a lot of people and deployments. So, yeah.
Cloud PBX is such a tedious thing. I kind of get there's no easy way to run that locally a lot of times. That's why so many companies go to these different hosted solutions. So I kind of get where their integration is with that. They've probably realized this is not easy to hand off, so to speak. And the way phone applications work in general, it's such a low latency type of thing. Mm-hmm. We were having problems with our VoIP provider today, and it was like, we know the people really well. We know the engineers there, and they're tricky problems to solve.
Yeah. So as far as I understand it, there's going to be two different things. There's going to be UniFi Talk, which runs on the UDM and the Cloud Key and stuff, and that would be for managing third-party phones with UniFi Talk, but also their own first-party phones. But this is essentially a way to get, as far as I understand it, essentially a way to get UniFi Talk phones connected with third-party PBX, if that's right. Okay. There must obviously be a call out for that. If they've made the effort to make it. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of a less straightforward win. I think of like the OnVIF cameras, where you could add third-party cameras to UniFi Protect. This is something that people have been asking for a long time. Like, we use RingCentral or 3CX or Zoom, and that's our VoIP provider. We don't want to switch, but we do want to be able to use UniFi Talk hardware, their desk phones, whatever. So I think people have been wanting this for a long time, and like Tom mentioned, the complexities of hosting a PBX and everything that's involved with just VoIP traffic and handling all of that. It is kind of unfortunate this isn't, you can't self-host it, and you can't use a UniFi OS console. You need to use the $29 a month and up network server. So it can also conflict with the way you manage your network, where you could have a self-hosted network with UXGs, but then you need to pay the $30 a month to get this. And it gets a little bit messy. But if you're in the UniFi ecosystem, this is kind of a nice option for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so weird the way all these companies work, and it's come down to 3CX, Zoom, RingCentral, and Microsoft Teams. Those become like the popular VoIP providers, and they're kind of eating up the market right now. You kind of got to play ball with them, which, like you said, it's not the win probably UniFi is looking for, but there's a lot of challenges in VoIP. I got into the VoIP business, and I got out of the VoIP business very quickly. I've dove into it twice, and I regretted both.
Yeah. And then this one final one. We're recording this on 28th of January, and literally yesterday, Ubiquiti released one of their fancy pants sort of animated video type thing, which I'm always fascinated how they make those things. But anyway, very, very cool. But it's basically discussing a few new bits and pieces. So Protect 5.2, which we'll dive into in a bit. But also, one product that we discussed on the show in November with Clay Archer was the AI Key. And that was apparently shown off at the UWC in Miami a few months ago. So that got leaked online, so I covered that on my website. But they've finally shown off this new AI key, which we'll get to in a bit. But I thought, as usual, the video was really well done, really sort of smooth and well animated and really cool. So
they got that part down.
Yeah, they have.
Well, yeah, and they had other videos recently, but that's it was mostly focused on the hardware we're about to talk about.
Yep.
So the theme for all the network hardware that we got, it mostly seems to be 2.5 gig everywhere. So we got the Pro HD 24 and Pro HD 24 PoE switches, which are full rack mount, 24 port switches with every port is 2.5 gig, or I think there's two 10 gig RJ45.
I was selling that today.
Yeah,
after
and
the podcast.
They're kind of like Pro Max level, but a little bit extra, just because of the higher density of high-speed ports.
And 600 watt PoE budget too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not cheap. So the Pro HD 24 is 600, the PoE model is 1,000, but very high throughput and very high PoE power. So you're kind of getting what you pay for those.
I don't know about you, but Max sounds like it'd be better than Pro HD, but
right. And this is another adjective. So we have Pro Max. It's Pro HD. There's no Max in there. So I wonder if we're going to get a Pro HD Max or something.
The one problem with the Switch is I can't put it in a normal like 6 or 9U box, like a wall mount for an IDF. It's too deep. So as cool as they made it, I took it apart and when I did the review of it on my channel, I was like, I'm going to open this thing up because I want to show people what's inside. And it's a giant heatsink and a lot of fans and a good plenum to make it quiet. But to the downside, directing it like that, the thing is so deep, it doesn't fit anywhere easily. I mean, it'll fit in a normal rack, but if you're trying to do an IDF going, hey, this is a great point here. So even myself, how I'm mounting it is through an open system because I'm redoing the wiring in my lab, so I'm going to do probably a video on it. But one of the things I want to point out is, why did I mount it this way? So I can't stick it in a normal box. It's just it'd stick right out of it.
Is the non-PoE model the same depth? I'd have to look.
I think so. I think they use exactly the same chassis and just didn't put the PoE in it.
Well, and the other thing is, there's 24 ports in a single row along the front, so that might not match up. If you have like a 48-port patch panel, you might need two switches for the one patch panel. It might get a little bit messy, but the depth is a good thing to call out.
Yeah, it makes a difference because the way like Cisco does it with some of their PoEs, their small business line. They put a big heatsink on the outside back of it to help dissipate it. That way, it's a different architecture, but it's a lot shorter. So that's kind of what it comes down to, is like depth. If you're trying to do IDFs and you're trying to do planning, it messes it up, because most of those IDF spots, you're like, oh, cool, this wiring closet will get this. Well, if you're putting it in a box, the depth is like, well, that's a challenge.
Right. Well, hey, if those are too big, we also got the Flex 2.5 gig. Same thing, where there's a non-PoE model and a PoE model. These are much smaller. And like all the other Flex models, they can be powered by PoE in. So these are all 2.5 gig ports. It does have a 10 gig RJ45 for PoE input. It also has an SFP Plus combo port, so you can only use one of those at a time. And the only thing it does, there's a lot of missing features. Like it does support spanning tree, because that was kind of I think when the
first gen Flexes came out, didn't support spanning tree. And they didn't have certain VLAN tagging. This one's only missing the lag option, so you can't do any of that with I believe that's missing in these.
Right. Okay. On the other Flex models, and I'm thinking of the Ultra. I think the Ultra switch came out without spanning tree. They added it later. And there was a couple other features like DHCP snooping, voice VLAN tagging. It might not show up in the port manager view where you can go and make custom port profiles. So there's a few features missing, but it's a nice little switch, especially if you just need a bunch of 2.5 gig interfaces.
Yeah.
What I quite like with this one, they added a new DIN rail mount for it, but it's also going to be compatible with other models like the Ultra switches, so, and a magnetic mount too. So some nice little options for mounting as well. So
yeah, and this can do PoE+++ input. I forget if it's the enterprise campus switches. I think whichever models have that kind of 90 watt PoE standard, you finally have a device that can use it.
Am I right in thinking that PoE++, is it 3 pluses?
3 pluses.
Yeah,
Am I right in thinking that's not BT? It's like an unofficial standard. Is that right, or am I got that wrong?
It's level 4 or type 4. So if you go read the standard. Because people were complaining about Ubiquiti calling it with 3 pluses. I've seen a Reddit post on it. I'm laughing going, guys, if you didn't know, the standard doesn't also call it PoE++ either. That is outside of the IEEE ratified standard. The engineers give it engineering names that don't really roll off the tongue, and then they have is it AT standard, and then it's type 3 and type 4. It will vary the wattage. So you have that variation in there. But for marketing reasons, and obviously writing it on a port, what looks better? 3 pluses and 2 pluses. I actually think if the industry could actually settle on something, it would be PoE 90 for 90 watts. If you those are 4 letters or 5 letters you could put on a port small enough to write, and I would know the wattage of each port, which would be even better. So
right,
this requires PoE 90.
And then you have Cisco saying UPoE, which is the same thing as 802.3 BT, aka 60 watt PoE++. And if you want to have some fun, go read the IEEE 802.3 PoE standards, which it's a fun read.
Yeah, BT. That's what I think I said. AT, but yes.
Well, there's AF, AT, BT, and subclasses, and it gets complicated. So I don't blame them for just saying PoE++, because that's a very simple marketing term to understand. This is higher wattage than plus.
If you Google for that, Ubiquiti is the most popular company using it, but several camera companies are using it, and that's what they put on their cameras. This requires some of the higher end security cameras. I think I found some references and some documentation. That's what they require is the 3 pluses, because they need that many watts to run.
I see. Yeah, you are right. It is the enterprise campus 48 PoEs, or the campus PoE switches that have that 90 watt PoE on most of the ports, I think.
Right.
So, yeah.
Oh, and the only other thing I wanted to point out about these, it does support the same 210 watt external power supply that the Ultra does, but it's not included. So if you want to have the full PoE output on these 8 ports, you'd have to get the $80 add-on power adapter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the power adapter looks to be identical as what was the USX, the small one they made, the one of the first PoE 10 gig switches, the little desktop one. I think it looks like exactly the same power adapter for that.
10 gig?
Or the Flex XG. I think they've renamed it.
I have one of those on my bench. It's really old. I can't remember the name of it right now.
Yeah, that's the one. It's the Flex XG, the model name for it.
Or they had some first gen, like the XG6 PoE.
Oh yeah, it was like silver, wasn't
that's
it?
the one.
Yeah, they
that's
don't
the
sell
one.
those anymore, or maybe they're hidden in the store. But
They're a discontinued model.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, some nice options, some good prices on those as well.
USXG6
So,
PoE. It's still on. It works. It's still getting updates. It's not. It may be of end of sale, but it's not end of life because I had an update not that long ago.
nice. Yeah, some good prices on those models too, and they look like they'll be really useful, and some good sort of 10 gig options on those. So I think they'll be quite successful with those. So this next one, I think this was announced via a video earlier this month too. But this was the U7 Pro Outdoor AP.
Yes.
And am I right in thinking this one adds? There's another U7 Outdoor model, isn't there, that doesn't have 6 gigahertz? Am I right in thinking? And that's the U7.
correct.
U7 Outdoor. This one's a U7 Pro Outdoor. So yeah, so we've now got 6 gigahertz, which has been, I guess, signed off for use outdoors. But also it's got an adjustable mount as well, so you can angle it in certain directions, which is quite nice. So.
They got a nice mount on it. The way it works, at least here in the U.S., I don't know how it works outside the U.S., the system has to scan for channels that are available in the 6, and then it can use those channels provided there's nothing in the range stepping on it. So you can use the 6 indoors, but when it comes to outdoors, the system has to listen and it'll lock out the channels that are not available in your area. I believe that was the agreement of how people can use Wi-Fi in that range without having to basically, because in early days it was like, you can't use this is for something else already, but the demands of Wi-Fi have pushed, and that's what we have now.
Yeah, and it sounds a little bit like DFS.
Similar, yeah.
Similar, yeah. Judging by Ubiquiti's article, the only country in the entire world that can have 6 gigahertz is the United States, so everyone else is indoor. So
I believe it's Canada too, because they mentioned the FCC and IC region. That would cover Canada.
Maybe this page isn't up to date then, because Canada's not listed as being,
or they didn't get approval in Canada maybe, but Canada should be added, and I'm not sure if this hardware will be supporting 6 gigahertz outdoor like in the UK or in Europe or other regions. I wouldn't buy it based on that promise, but yeah, the U7 non-pro outdoor doesn't have 6 gigahertz at all because of you need you need like a GPS antenna, you need a bunch of things to use 6 gigahertz outdoors. So this is the cheapest outdoor 6 gigahertz standard power if you're in the US. It's kind of like a cheaper version of the E7 Campus, I believe, is outdoor 6 gigahertz. And it's pretty similar where it has a directional antenna. It's kind of a higher end model, but it's a nice cheaper option for people considering outdoor 6 gigahertz coverage.
Yeah, I don't feel like, eventually outdoor 6 will have demand. I feel like they're just trying to be on the cutting edge. When we're bidding stuff for clients, they're not really asking for the 6. They're mostly just coverage, and 5 and 2.4 is where it's still at.
Right, and the U7 Pro, or even like a cheap Wi-Fi 5 or 6 AP is probably good enough for covering a backyard or something, unless you're trying to do something really high end.
Yeah, you also mentioned that this U7 Pro Outdoor has external antenna support, but I noticed you noted in the show notes that the antenna isn't compatible with 6 gigahertz at this stage. I wonder what happens if you plug antennas in. Does it turn off 6 gigahertz for itself, or
probably?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that's tied into the rules around outdoor and standard power 6 gigahertz operation. You can't use external antennas, so I would assume it would use the built-in. It's like a 90-degree internal antenna for 6 gigahertz operation, and then it would use the external omnis for 5 and 2.4.
I wonder if that's part of the rules, that it has to be focused in a particular location rather than sort of broadcasted everywhere, I guess.
I think you can have 6 gigahertz omni, but it has to be an internal integrated antenna. You can't have you can't be plugging in a
because someone will plug in something they're not supposed to as well.
Right. You'll plug in a 20 dBi dish or something and cause problems.
Nice.
I can picture happening that.
Yeah, probably. So this one's runs on PoE Plus, so AT, and then 2.5 gig uplink port. There's no sort of dual uplink. I guess the E7 Campus has that. And it's got articulated mounts, and it's $279 in the US, so not a bad price really for what you get. It's $258 in the UK, but it says available soon, so don't know. So yeah, no, it's not a bad price really for that sort of performance as well. The next range of devices is the UniFi Access G3, and on the face of it, the only real new device is that new Reader Flex, which looks really, really quite interesting. Sort of a, I don't know, it's one of the only ones with a keypad, isn't it? That's got quite a large keypad, and it's got a lot of these new devices have Apple Wallet support for access with people's phones and watches and things. So I think that Reader Flex is a really good price, and it's gives you a lot of options when it can be used outdoors. So I think that's quite good, really.
Yeah, they mentioned in the video it was industrial rated, and they did call out that you can like use the keypad when you have gloves on or your hands are wet. I don't think it's IP rated higher than the others, but I guess it's meant for areas where you might have dirty hands to touch a pin pad. And it doesn't have a camera. I forget if it has like a speaker and microphone.
Doesn't look like it. I think it's just a keypad, and with the Apple. Oh, it does have a speaker. Sorry, it does have a speaker. Does have a speaker. Doesn't look like any microphone though. It says unlock with the keypad, NFC card, UniFi Identity, and TouchPass. And then TouchPass is just the Apple Wallet stuff. But doesn't look like there's a microphone, to be honest.
I'd assume there kind of has to be. Otherwise, isn't it
Yeah.
for a guest coming up to a door, or maybe it's only for.
Inspect to see if I see it under.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll figure it out live.
Yeah, can't figure that out.
But we also, we got G3 versions of the Reader and Reader Pro, which from I even looked side by side. They look very similar to the G2 and G3 models. They did add that Apple TouchPass support, so you can take like an iPhone or an Apple Watch and unlock it. And it does, I think these G3 devices are the first to add facial recognition, so you can do like face unlock. But I think outside of those features, different options for, getting into the door rather than just NFC cards or, the mobile app. The new hardware doesn't look all that different.
No, the only thing I noted that changed on the hardware with the G3 stuff, the white one specifically, is a shade of white slightly different. That's the only thing I could find.
Well, upgrade now for your new shade of white.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've started to play a few more of those at customers. People seem to really like them. I was skeptical for a while when they first came out. I mean, we tested it, but I was like, the longevity that people expect out of that product made me nervous about installing them. But we had people contact us, and I was able to do a whole video on a chemical factory that we installed it. And the customer's been really happy. They let us use their name and everything, and we showed just how large scale of an install we did. And they're running along fine. Matter of fact, the coolest thing, even the customer thinks, is it's a better system than when we installed it through software improvements. Like, it's got more features now.
Oh, yeah. Sweet.
And they didn't pay a license fee for that because I can't remember, they were using one of the commercial ones, and they really hated everything was every update, every subscription fee was always more. They're like, hey, we have a new feature. Oh, cool. We get it with an update with a subscription. Oh, you can add another subscription to get the feature.
Jeez. Yeah, that I'd imagine with that sort of stuff, it just gets really bad because what are you going to do? Rip it all out and start again? That's
the whole model they work off of. It's too hard to switch. Well, when you're building a new building, it's easy to switch.
That's really bad. And then also new was this brand new Door Hub Mini, which I really like the look of because. So, for example, I think Cody mentioned it last episode. So if people use this Access Ultra, he was mentioning that if you use that outdoors, for example, you could take it off the wall and then short the pins together and get access to the door, essentially. But that was really one of the most cost-effective ways to get one door connected. But by the look of things, this new Door Hub Mini looks like it's designed for one door, and you can have two or three readers on it, potentially two. And it's not very expensive either. It's £102 in the UK, and I guess similar sort of price in the US as well. So that's a really nice little compact option for that.
Yeah, and they have a new G3 starter kit for $300 US, or the starter kit Pro for $600 with either the Door Hub Mini or the traditional Door Hub. And yeah, I didn't realize the Hub Mini was new. But yeah, lots of new access stuff and some new software to go along with it too. But
they seem pretty committed to it now. I got some of the new equipment they sent me, and I got to play with it. So I got some of it, but I didn't have a chance to unbox it even before the release because I was busy with all the other networking gear I was playing with.
Well, yeah, I saw you had a video I think a month or two ago saying like UniFi Protect. from underdog to industry leader.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think the progress on Protect has been the most obvious, and especially late last year, they had a lot of things that changed. I think Talk and Access are probably the two lagging, like the hobby projects for them. So it's good to see new hardware and a lot of movement on the software. But yeah, I think Access and Talk probably needed the love the most.
We've been diving into is I have some friends with some large installs, and I've worked with Ubiquiti. Some of the equipment we get to test with their installs, because I don't have any large ones that I directly manage, so I've been learning a lot more about it. But the number of people I've met, because I asked for kind of a reach out to me, and people did for some of their installs, it's been interesting because of one of them's an Access person. Like, they were hard into Access for a long time, and they're like, AXIS, that mod, and they're like, yeah, these cameras rival it. The system interface is far better, but the quality of the cameras is what shocked them. So I'm actually working on some head-to-head stuff where we take some of the real expensive Access cameras and set them side by side with the high-end Ubiquiti stuff. That's kind of our plan, and see who can, in a real-world situation, these two cameras next to each other, who can actually pick up the right stuff.
That'd be actually quite interesting, because
the Access is among the top, if you want to talk about industry leaders. But that's one of the reasons that drove that video to say industry leader, was I was shocked at how many large companies reached out to me that had switched and had some large installs. Like, okay, we've done some pretty big installs, but I say pretty big, and usually around 50 or 60 cameras. These guys are, stacking them together, and it's been interesting to see how much they love them.
Yeah, very cool.
We've also got some new phones on the topic of UniFi Talk. So these are, I think they did a video for these as well, but this is their third generation UniFi Talk phones now. And there's 3 new phones. So there's the G3 Touch Pro, which is the touch phone, just that slimmer one. G3 Touch Enterprise, which is the same as the Max phone. And there's this brand new device called the G3 Touch Wall, which is a sort of a wall-mounted device. And there's also, for the first time, a wireless handset, which I thought was quite interesting. It wasn't quite done how I expected them to do it, because this doesn't have a screen on it, so you can't see who's calling. It's just got a signal level and battery level, but it's good nonetheless, because people like to walk around and be on the phone and stuff.
Yeah.
So I thought it was quite cool.
Yeah, and just like the Access, it seems like the hardware didn't change too much. I saw anti-glare coating, maybe a better speaker microphone. I think the big thing is that the talk relay feature we talked about earlier is gated. It only is supported on the G3 devices. I don't know if there's underlying hardware reasons for that, or if the G2 and older talk phones will get that in the future. But yeah, maybe you'll have to pony up for some new phones if you want to use that.
I'm just having a quick look at what the specs of the old phones are. If they're any different, it doesn't.
Side by side, the only thing I noticed was they gave slightly more details about the microphone, the anti-glare coating on the screen. Seems like the same. Like, it's basically just running Android underneath, and it seems like it's the same commodity CPU in there. Like, it's not more powerful hardware-wise. So that's I don't know why the reason for locking the talk relay feature to these specifically, but.
The only thing I can see is it's got the same CPU, same storage, same RAM, but it's using more power. So, for example, the Pro phone, the slimmer one, it's 15 watts for the new one and 8 watts for the old one. So I don't know if there's any. I don't know. You could read so much into that, but there's no real difference there. But yeah,
7 watts for relay.
There you go. No, I as you were saying earlier, the UniFi Talk seems like a little hobby for them, but it's nice that they're taking it more seriously, because just by the sounds of it, the whole enterprise world of phones and VoIP things can be just as messy as anything else. So
it's the problem, and I think the same term they're facing, like we said earlier, is getting into the couple companies that actually do the provisioning, because you can take one of those, the forever old Cisco phones that everyone's got that are like from 12 years ago, and they still provision fine on like Ring Central, and people are slow to get those off their desks because ain't broke, don't fix it, no matter how many security patches behind they are. They really should always be on their own VLAN. There's always, if anyone bothers to poke at them, there's always a bunch of flaws, and everyone's got the password set the same anyways.
Yeah. So all these new phones, the one that's available right now is the smaller G3 Touch Pro, and then the other 2 phones, the Wall and the Enterprise, are going to be available in April, and then that wireless handset is going to be available in February. quite cool little upgrade to the lineup. It's good to see them still focusing on it, because yeah, you're just a little bit worried sometimes they're just going to pull the plug on things, but I don't think they're going to do that anymore. So
that's what's made us slow to adopt, because was it their first gen ones got abandoned, and
yes,
yeah. It just, I never got into them with the first gen ones, and a lot of other people in the VoIP space just said nah, and I've just shied away from them. Phone systems, like I said, they have their own. We resell it through our company phone service, but we don't want to mess with that, because any phone problems turns immediately into irate customers.
Yes. Yeah, it's very sensitive. Right.
And finally, in the longest hardware update section I think we've ever had, this is the last one, the AI key. We talked about this. I know we talked about it with Clay, so we probably don't need to go over too much, but this basically is a little box you put on your network, and it can handle apparently up to 1,000 smart detection events per hour. So it's kind of additional compute to enhance the AI features of UniFi cameras, but it's a nice little box.
Yeah, when we discussed it with Clay, we had the only thing we had to go on was like a slideshow, like grainy image. So we've definitely got way more information than we had before. But have you had a chance to mess around with this, Tom? I don't know if
only a little bit, and I forgot to post it. What I did was I had a beer, and I stood in front of the camera. When it finally was released, I could share it with a couple of my friends, and it says "man holding beer," and I was like, "This is a new feature from UniFi." They go, "Why does it say man holding beer?" I was like, "It told me that," and they're like, "What?" And I was like, "So I've only played briefly with it, but man holding beer is what my friends thought was funny," and so I haven't dove deep into it, but it is kind of cool how it describes what's in the picture. I haven't really done a lot of deep diving on it, but obviously Clay has. He's got a long video that he's released on it. I would have played with it more. I like where they're going with it. I like the fact that there's the ability to connect multiple of these so you distribute the jobs. I from a concept, and this is something I said in my video about them, I really like that their NVR platform stays inexpensive for the base model. So it's easy to get into and easy to upgrade for those that want those extra features, versus when I sold a lot of other NVR systems, and we still do, I have to not ask you what you want. I have to ask what future you thinks you want, and you have to spend money now that present you may not have, that future you might have. This is a planning problem when companies are going through expansion. It's a lot of NVRs don't support stacking, or they don't support some of these features. UniFi going, hey, I'll sell you this base model and stack it with another model later. Oh yeah, you want detections? Can't afford it today? Well, we got them. Buy it later. Add that extra AI key. From a building block concept that makes the sales job easier, and growing into an ecosystem a lot easier. So I'm really here for that. I think that's a much better approach than these other companies going, let me sell you a box with all the horsepower, but I only need 4 cameras today. Well, you got to buy this box if you ever want to add 8 more cameras later, and that's a bigger, bite in the wallet.
So I'm just reading the FAQs page. I don't know if you can use the AI key and the AI port together, because what it said here is that AI port offers real-time processing, while AI key is depending on the queue length. So I don't know if you can. I can't work it out, to be honest.
Well, so the AI key real time is adding context to video feeds for cameras that don't have features. So if a camera doesn't have face detection, or you're using a third-party camera with OwnVIF, you'll get the face detection, you'll get the event detection, you'll get the license plate reading, and all those extra, there's an animal, there's a human on the camera, and that context is added in real time. What the AI key is doing in post is looking at things. You can look at a previous recording and be able to find something, or you can go through and say, find this object. So it's real time versus in post.
I see. That's interesting. So it will. I wonder if you plugged it in now, would it go back and look at old footage with it and then figure out?
I think so. I think you can have it. I'm a little fuzzy on that part. I have not watched Clay's video on it, and oddly, and it was me not following up with them. When I first got it, which is actually a while ago, they sent it to me in December. I tried plugging it in, and even though I was on early access, it told me it didn't exist. And I said, oh, okay, whatever. I unplugged it and set it aside. And then as I was testing some stuff, like just a day before its release, I plugged it in, and boom, it just magically showed up all of a sudden. I'm like, oh, cool. And I know there's been a couple updates to protect since then. And so I've only played with it briefly. And man holds beer is really as far as I got. Well, that's cool. It recognized me holding a beer.
you had me at man holds beer. Yeah. I did being identified. And yeah, the AI port, it's right now it's 1-to-1, so you'd have one camera for one AI port.
Yeah.
I think Cody mentioned it, and they even have it like in the FAQ. It'll soon be like 1-to-3 or 1-to-5.
Yeah.
But the AI key is 1-to-many, so this is like one AI key for all of your cameras. You just run into limitations of how much it can process at one time, and it'll just kind of, I guess, get further out of real time.
Detection per hour.
Yeah.
Because it's what you can do in an hour's worth of time. And my understanding, you're supposed to be able to stack. So you can query it and it can start indexing. Of course, there's going to be a lot of limitations on, how fast, how much footage you have, being able to query and find things. So I'm still learning a little bit about it. So it's on my to-do list to really dive into it. I'll actually probably watch Clay's video first. Like, he figured all the... He's been playing with it a lot more than I have.
Yeah, I saw he has a good video out about it.
Yeah.
I'm just reading the FAQs. It says queue limit 200 events. And it says any excess detections are actually going to be discarded and not processed. And it says each queue can take 50 minutes to process. So I wonder in the GUI if there's a way to view what's currently in the queue, and then you can work out for yourself, I need to purchase another one because there's too much stuff here. So I wonder how they're going to process that kind of thing, which would be quite interesting to see.
Because Clay has a couple of them. I only have one. So I know he's probably tested that. So
I have 5.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Because
good.
they have a cool rack mount kit for it, so you can rack mount them, which is also really cool.
And yeah, $680 a pop. So just keep spending more money if you want more detections.
Yeah. But I mean, if you've looked up what some of those boxes cost that have those features, they're not cheap. So it's actually, to me, somewhat reasonable. I've worked in other ecosystems on these, and you get the ones that have the full. I mean, because they're doing it all with. That's why NVIDIA's worth so much. They have a bunch of NVIDIA cards essentially built into some of the NVRs so they can do this type of work, but those things are very expensive.
So yeah, you mentioned, so it supports unlimited cameras, in quotes, and has a max of 1,000 smart detections per hour. It has quite some beefy specs. So 16 gigs of RAM, an a ARM Cortex CPU, and then it takes PoE++ power. And at the moment, you can actually pair, in theory, an unlimited amount of AI keys to one UniFi OS console that's running UniFi Protect, which is quite an interesting part of it. So,
till you run out of IP addresses.
Yeah. But yeah, as Evan mentioned, it's $679, and it's out of stock already.
And yeah, for software, I think we can breeze through most of these. A lot of the big major updates, like Access went to 3.0, Protect went up to 5.2, but a lot of those things were tied in with the hardware that we talked about. So like Access 3.0 adds those features for the new G3 devices. I think the one I want to talk with Tom about is UniFi Network 9. Now, I know you covered that in a pretty recent video where I know you were comparing against PFSense, which is a common alternative. But I'm curious about how much you've done with the zone-based firewall and all the new stuff that comes with UniFi Network 9, and what do you think about all that?
I haven't deployed any in production, but overall, the zone-based system I'm very used to the way PFSense does it, but the zone-based system makes sense. It's more logical to say, okay, I know why we call something a DMZ, and I can group by certain policies. What we're starting to do, and I haven't finished this project, we'll have it done over the next couple of weeks, we're migrating a PFSense with 38 connected sites, and PFSense is the head of that. And there's obviously a lot of rules across 38 connected sites, and we're using one of the new UXGs for this. And we've run into at least one problem where there's going to be some display problems when you have that many rules. And so I've already talked to the UniFi team. They think they can solve this pretty easily with just some updates to the way rules get grouped, so they can put like some spacing between them and things like that. Maybe some, I gave them some suggestions. It's not on the roadmap officially. I'd love to say it was, but there's some ideas there. But overall, it seems to be a little bit more sense because you can filter down. So you have this giant dump of rules, and you can click on the zone, click on the policies, go, okay, these policies control this facet of it. So overall, I like it. It's definitely a departure from the way they did it. They still have kind of a ways to go to get some of the features that I would like. There's not an easy way yet to pivot through looking at. I don't like the way that they have it called flows. Flows in my head are network flows. They use that term differently, and that bothers me because I want to see exact IP traffic flows with ports and things like your PF top and PFSense give you really detailed information on that. That's something UniFi, even though they have the ability to export a lot of things, I want to see it real time on the firewall and the web UI. I'm hoping they get there soon. That's going to be kind of a heavy lift for them. Right now, the solution is no Linux commands, SSH in, and figure out what's going on with your Linux firewall. But they're way closer than they were, and that's an edge case for troubleshooting, which does matter. I mean, if you want to play in the enterprise space, I need to be able to do those type of things because you troubleshoot large networks. I need the tools appropriate. They have NetFlow, and most people are going to have something to ingest all of that to get some of that data. And they've done a much expanded version of that with their integration for, they call it their SIM integration. Really, they're just sending out, all the data that we'd hope they'd send out so we can actually dump that somewhere and parse through it to sort problems out.
Yeah, I was saying to Evan pre-show, it's the first time I've ever seen a firewall that kind of like a zone-based firewall system, so I'm not used to it. So I find it very confusing to start with, but I'm slowly getting there of how it works. So
it is. I think the newer, is it SonicWall uses it? There's a couple other of the bigger companies that do have similar setups, so it's not that outlandish, but they still need some linking because like when you create the objects for like create an object for ports and things like that, that's in a confusing spot because that goes back under profiles and there's not a link to that. So while you're creating a role, you can create the object, cool, but where did that object go when I delete the firewall role? How do I pull those back? And by the way, why aren't there a bunch of common ones in there? I'm going to open up 443 quite a bit, and I don't want to create an object for that. I feel like there's usually some predefined objects that are just pretty common. SSH, 443 for web services, etc. That would be handy. And I've told them as much. They wouldn't watch this and learn anything I didn't already send in a long email to them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a network engineer and I work with a zone-based firewall in my day job. So I'm probably not the best person to give an honest opinion. And yeah,
you are actually. Let's talk about doing it the way other companies do it.
Yeah, I guess for someone coming to it fresh without having that understanding, like to me, this was a huge welcome change. I always found the old system a little bit confusing, the way they had LAN, guest, internet, and you couldn't modify that kind of grouping. And you just had to make your rules within, like, the old system never made sense to me coming from the kind of enterprise zone-based world. So I think this is a huge welcome change, whereas for Alex, it was like, I don't know what this is. I'm so confused. Why does my network not work? I think there's some rough edges with the migration, the tooltips, the way the UI works. But I for one, am very happy to see this change, and I think it's a big improvement.
It's just hard for me coming from the PFSense world, and from even the enterprise space, that every port is just a port in a lot of their commercial firewalls. They don't have designations of LAN or WAN, and you could make any port anything you want. It just depends if it has a gateway, whether it's an upstream or downstream. So those concepts being so fundamental to me made it really hard being boxed in, I felt, with the way UniFi does it. And there's still a little bit of confusion for how you do some of the groupings. I highly pushed them for documentation. I said, you guys need really good, not just documentation, you need recipes for things, was my suggestion to them. Like,
that'd be
so
good. Yeah.
Take common scenarios. And I did, this is something I shared with them. I said, part of the success of the team at PFSense was their early days. They used to do all these live streams that would share out how they do things. And it was like this developer talk. They also had and always have had a ton of recipes along with their documentation. So here's documentation, how to port forward. Here's an entire step-by-step guide on how to set up something that's a really common setup in a firewall. Those guides are huge because you can iterate off them. Oh, once I know how to build these building blocks, I know how to iterate from there. And UniFi's documentation is a mess. So that's the easiest way I could describe it right now is just I keep landing on help articles that are 8 years old for a question someone has, not their actual documentation. Their GPT thing helps, but sometimes I didn't know they had a feature, and I didn't realize until I was talking to the UniFi people, like, oh, there's that feature. I Googled it before and I couldn't find it. And their own AI didn't answer the question appropriately because I didn't ask it. But if you're not using appropriate terms, and I'm like Evan here, back into this is the term everyone uses except for UniFi.
Right. They've done a lot of good things with their documentation, but yeah, to me, PFSense is, I don't want to call it the gold standard, but it's the one I'm most familiar with. Just the way that they have their document, and recipes and they explain the feature and some configuration examples. Like the way they have that in basically a big, it almost looks like a PDF, and they have like the table of contents on the left side. Like that to me is miles ahead better, and I hope they, work something like that in the future.
Yeah, and I would actually say it's the gold standard, because if you've worked with, and I actually had a good conversation with a friend who's all in on Fortinet, and he takes his licks.
Sorry for his loss.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because he's been a long, long time Fortinet partner. But one of the problems, even his complaint with Fortinet, is as big as companies they are. When I did one of my comparisons where I had Fortinet included in the firewall list, I sent it to him and he said, "You're wrong about this, wrong about this, wrong about this." And it was interesting when he showed me why I was wrong. Fortinet has a bunch of features that are just completely undocumented, but they're in certain product pages. He says their documentation's a mess. He goes, "I know how to do it." He goes, "I learned how to do it by calling the engineering team. Like, these are absolutely supported features that Fortinet just has never bothered building documentation for, because they have a team of engineers with internal documentation that will answer the question and set it up for you as part of your support contract that you have to have in order to have the Fortinet. So why bother documenting it, type thing." But that also hurts it, because if I'm trying to do a product comparison and I'm trying to do it, unless I have a sales rep with a sales engineer on the phone, I don't know that your firewall supports it, because your documentation doesn't say it does, which aggravates me. And we kind of live in a world now where that's what made PFSense popular. This will be a big success story for UniFi, as they have that documentation available to us that way.
Yeah. Documentation's really tough. It's tough to do it well, and it's tough to keep it updated, and it's a labor of love. But
it is. Well, I don't know about labor of love, but it's someone likes doing it. It isn't me.
I like when other people do
videos because I don't want to write it down.
Also in this update, we had Cyber Secure as well, which I'm really quite impressed by. I enabled it on my UDMSE a few weeks ago, and there's a few the additional rules it has. There's a few of them called policy violations. So those can generate some false positives. I've noticed with things like Windows Update. I've noticed it can do that.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that you might not want turned on, but generally I'm quite impressed with what they managed to do, and it's quite a reasonable price, I think. I don't know what other systems are out there that are comparable, but it seems like quite a good price, really.
I would say compared to and it's usually not broken out necessarily. When you buy some of the other firewalls, Cisco Firepower, some of your really big ones out there are part of your subscription gets you all the extra threat feeds that come with it. Cisco's going to come with everything from Talos, because they own Snort, so they're going to get the more advanced rules. Proofpoint's a big name in the business, so they picked an appropriate company to. There's a lot of people though that conflated Proofpoint, who does also do spam filtering for email. They're like, "I don't like that Proofpoint email." I'm like, "No, this is not email filtering. This is Proofpoint, which does offer threat intel feeds." It does have quite a few features in there. People have been asking me to kind of examine the efficacy of it, and I said that's really, really hard to do, because there's not any easy way to examine the efficacy of threat feeds, because they're updated in real time. And what does that really mean? So could I find, what if I found a hacker somewhere? Cool, hold on. Let me not report this. Let me drop it in a UniFi and see if it picks up this, and we'll know if it's in Proofpoint's threat feed. Not an easy way to test it, but there's some overall proven things that are in there. They list known bad actors. They're pulling from good public sources generally to do this. So it is a good extra layer of protection. And more important, it's a compliance thing that some companies may have to have, that you have to have some type of active feed into there, more than what UniFi gives you on your own, which is the ET Open rules, which are from Suricata. If you look up Suricata ET Open, you can see the rule sets they were using. Those are the free ones you still get if you don't buy the Proofpoint. But it's nice that they, like I said, it's an extra enhanced feature that a lot of people are looking for, and that price is reasonable, I think.
Yeah, definitely. So we also had the Site Manager 4.5.23, which nicely correlates into the Hub and Spoke SD-WAN features that they announced. Have you had a chance to play with this? I think this is sort of like the ability to play with it has the need for having multiple devices available. So
yeah. It is kind of cool. I like that you only need one public IP and it builds it all on the back end. They've done a nice job of making that easier. I kind of joke we're going to set some of this up, and this is also why we're doing these large scale site. One, this is always harder in PFSense. PFSense has no automated tool for this. And I did my WireGuard video recently, and people started looking at it going, wow, there's two options here. You can figure out how to tie BGP and FRR into there to scale all of the networks you have across all these different sites, or you're going to do a lot of manual route entry. And doing that for you is really nice, the fact that they offer it. My complaint still, the big missing features are building all this on WireGuard on the back end. Perfect. Why aren't they exposing it for me to do some of this? Because for interoperability reasons, I mean, UniFi lives in the perfect UniFi world. I don't. I live in a world where I may have a bunch of UniFi systems, but I have to have interoperability with other firewalls. I can't always change what's on the other site. I can't always get the customer to migrate all of their firewalls simultaneously across other sites. So the lack of good UI interface for WireGuard, even though I know it can do it in the back end because you're doing it with some of these tooling, that is still where they fall short. But I think that's something they're going to have solved pretty soon on that, because if the tooling's there, they just got to get the UI right to for us to manage it.
Yeah, and it's also limited to, so you can't use self-hosted stuff like UXGs with it just yet.
Right.
I'm hoping, I don't know if at some point they will add it. I'm hoping they will, but we shall see.
Well, you can, I think, if you also tie it to their site. You can't use it self-hosted without being tied to their site. The problem is there's no way for the system, well, they're not going to build a way, I should say. This could be done. If you're using self-hosted, it has to track all the IPs. And of course, self-hosted knows that, but they haven't built the mechanism for it. But when you tie it to their cloud, then you have the mechanism to track all the different IPs across all of them. So conceptually, like, they could build it. I don't know if they will. It'd be cool if they did. I'm a little fuzzy on if they're actually going to take the time to do that, because they're like, why wouldn't you attach to our cloud? Well, some people are, cloud averse in general. Even though it's a free service, it's also not having my control plane having access to a third-party company. That is a security concern.
Do you mean having a site that's self-hosted connected to the unifi.ui.com dashboard?
Correct.
So I've obviously got some Hostify sites that have got UXGs on them, and they don't show up for use.
I think maybe it's on a roadmap, or maybe it's an early access thing that I seen I was supposed to talk about.
Let's hope so.
Oh, well.
We're going to strike that from the record.
Strike that.
Right.
No worries.
But yeah, so this is a great, if you're in the happy world where you have a bunch of, I guess, cloud gateways is kind of the device you need. And you have, 10 different stores and you have a cloud gateway at each, like, this is an amazing feature for that. Once you get out of that happy world and you start having third-party firewalls or self-hosted networks, or like once you get out of the happy case, it gets a little bit more complicated. And you could build that stuff manually, but for the feature, no license and just tie all this hardware together and click a couple buttons, it's really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't see as many, even from consulting and things like that. Most everyone has been really going to the cloud gateways. The UniFi Dream Machine Pro SE is incredibly popular. So we don't see as many UXGs. So that's why I chose the UXGs with self-hosted as my test to replace the thing. Because I know there's the crowd that go, I'm in that category. I want the self-hosted. I like them in my Hostify controllers. That is the crowd I'm trying to see how it works with when we do the site-to-site. We're testing on it. We are building a site-to-site manually. Eventually we may do that because this is a controller not tied to account.ui. Well, at least right now it's not. It's my friend's setup I'm helping him with, so we're seeing if he manages all this stuff for his company. So
Nice.
he's letting us gamble on all this stuff.
Risky.
Yes, it is. But it's fun.
Is there anything else in UniFi 9 that you wanted to bring up before we move on to anything else, Evan?
No, we covered it. I think the API might be the other big thing. Along with like the log export, I know Tom mentioned earlier. And just in general, like, when I think of the way UniFi Network used to be, especially a couple of years ago, and the complete lack of real-time logging, alerting, what Tom mentioned, where you could see the actual ports, you kind of get like a netstat view of like this public IP is talking to this device. It's not quite all the way towards where PFSense or like a really high-end enterprise firewall is, but they've come a long way, and I think the API is a big step there. I haven't played around with it, but I know a lot of people are happy about that being there.
The part that the API is cool, and I think there's some cool integration ideas, but Microsoft Entra, AD, Google Secure LDAP, Jump Cloud, that integration, because we have a lot of people that come to us. They're not going to change their identity provider. I get that UniFi ID is cool, but guess what? My clients are full SSO because sometimes they have as many as 40 line of business applications we've tied together with SSO. And then if they need a VPN back into the office, cool. I'd love tying in with their identity provider. I've been doing that for years with PFSense. I'm going to tie it to their Active Directory. Same story. And now that UniFi has got better support for that, that is wonderful, because now I can use VPN. They can tie it to that. Because it's funny when you ask them, they're like, "Oh, user identity." I said, "Cool. What am I supposed to do with all these line of business applications that are tied to their Active Directory?" And that's the world they know and love.
Right.
And Jump Cloud's fair. A few companies are in there. I'm surprised Okta's not a list because they got Jump Cloud, but not Okta. But maybe Okta will come down there. We have a few people that are into Okta.
Well, I think they have an other. I don't know if you can just like put in a URL.
Yeah, I
string or
think you
something,
could probably do like
but-
Okta through LDAP or something probably as well.
Right. And I think that was in UniFi OS 4.1.13 for the cloud gateways. The UXGs are always kind of slightly trailing, so I don't know if that feature is there for UXG or if it isn't supported with self-hosted. Like, there's a lot of little weird feature differences when you get the UXG versus cloud gateway.
Yeah, they always, because they're separate code bases, they lag a little bit behind.
Yeah. But yeah, very cool that they had added that. And still, we have custom certificates for the web GUI, but we don't have custom certificates for the hotspot portal. But that may be by the end of the year. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, I tweeted at Ubiquiti maybe a couple weeks ago, and I said, "Hey, I'm glad to see you're still sponsoring Let's Encrypt for the last 3 years. Thanks for sponsoring the team." I was actually hoping when they made a big deal and announced it that was a roadmap thing. Like, hey, we're going to include some Let's Encrypt certs. Thank you for your donation. I think Let's Encrypt's great, and I'm glad that Ubiquiti's donating to it. If only they could integrate it. Like, do the other thing too. They're a gold sponsor for Let's Encrypt. I have friends that work at Let's Encrypt, and I was like, "Hey, check, Ubiquiti's just sponsoring you guys," and he's like, "That's cool." Then he's like, "Are we going to get integration to the thing?" I said, "It seems like they are." And 3 years later,
Right. Sponsoring and also help keep them in business by a lot of leads.
yeah. So yeah, I would like that integration, because I mean I avoid captive portal as at all possible, but sometimes if you're in the hospitality industry, sorry, you have to use that. And LE certs would make that nice or less painful.
Yeah. Well, yeah, plenty of other software. I think we've wrung this dry. I think we should get out of here. The only other thing is the AI LPR, which is the license plate reader. That camera is now on sale. And also the Enterprise ENVR Bezel, the $300 touchscreen thing for your rack mount NVR, that is on sale as well. So plenty of good stuff out there to buy if you want to spend some money.
I also noted that so the US store, it's still got the old design for the store, but the Canadian store and the UK store have got a new design, and you can't now find the UISP stuff anymore. So on the existing US store, you've got this little button at the top that says UniFi, UISP, and Amplify. If you go to the Canadian store, for example, that button's now gone. So I don't know if they stopped selling UISP gear directly from their own channels. I don't know. So don't know what's going on with that.
To be continued. Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there was one more device which Cody tweeted about. It's called the PoE over 2-wire retrofit extender. Now, apparently, if you've got coax in a house, you can run PoE and data over them using this adapter, which is quite cool.
That's neat.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, as Evan alluded to, I think we've gone on far too long in this episode.
Sorry.
Before we get out of here, have you got anything that you're working on that you'd like to let the listeners/watchers know about, Tom?
Oh, just the rebuilding of my lab, and I'm filming it, and I've got some videos on cabling coming up, which always get people excited, like how to label it, why you should be using DAC, why there's a bunch of DAC cables and stuff all around me right now. So
Nice.
look for that, the usual YouTube stuff.
Nice stuff. Evan, you've just written LOL next to your name, so
Yeah, it took me 45 days to compile these show notes, so haven't had much time for writing. Also, yeah, in my day job, we're speaking of documentation, we're going through and trying to document all of our standards, like all of our processes and how we handle building infrastructure. So that has consumed all of my writing time, and we're finally done with that. So hopefully getting back to writing here soon.
Feels good to have all that documented. It's
Yes.
good stuff. And very quickly, I'm working. I think I mentioned last episode I'm working on a UNAS review. I can't remember, but I'm a little bit slow going with it, so I've still got mine working on it. I'm quite impressed with the UNAS so far. I've moved all my Final Cut Pro projects to it. I'm editing off the UNAS now versus having SSDs all over my desk. So I'm quite happy with the UNAS so far. It's really, really good.
I like that product. I think for the price point, they killed it. I'm
impressed.
The biggest feature it has.
It's something I've wanted for many, many years because I didn't really want to fork out for. I didn't really want to learn a new system. And this was so easy to understand.
Intuitive, yeah. I think they did a nice job on that.
Yeah, it's really good. And then elsewhere, I've been doing lots of car reviews and stuff on the Interface Cars channel. So, as I alluded to earlier, I was filming 2 new Chinese cars today. So, lots of stuff happening. So, yeah.
Nice.
All good. Again, thank you for listening to the UI Chat podcast. If you like what we do, follow the show on all the podcast platforms and on YouTube. Give us a rating. This really does help other people find this show. Thank you, Tom, so much for joining us on this episode. It's been really good to have your insight on all the latest software and hardware that's been launched. Where can people find you online if they want to find out more about you and what you do?
Everything's at lawrencesystems.com. Links to all the different socials that I'm available on whenever you're going there. So
good stuff. And then, Evan, whereabouts can people find you?
evanmccann.net.
Good stuff. You can find The Interface at theinterface.uk. And thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.